On your way over there, you're supposed to be on camera with us.
Nope,
Yeah.
I'm manning my station.
Okay, you're out on YouTube, guys. Let me start record.
No,
A lot of people probably seen you.
oh, Bill.
Okay, you're all set, Cliff?
Right. I have 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting of the Rochester, Town of Rochester Zoning Board of Appeals to order. For the record, in view of the fact that we are short members, Andrew will be sitting tonight as an active member. Will the secretary call the roll?
Chair Mallory,
Present.
Mr. Carr,
Present.
Mr. Fisher, Mr. Behringer.
Present.
I'd like to read the following. I have confirmed with the town's council that tonight's meeting has been convened in accordance with the governor's March 13, 2020 executive order 202, 202.1, which suspends certain provisions of the open meetings law allowing municipal boards to convene a meeting via video conference. In accordance with the executive order, the public has been provided with the ability to view tonight's meeting via YouTube, and the transcript will be provided at a later date. Secretary has completed a roll call of the board members, and there is a quorum present for the meeting. Also confirmed with the secretary that this meeting has been duly noticed. We have fulfilled our legal notice requirements by posting notice on the town for bulletin board and outside door, posting legal notice in the Sean Dunn Journal, and posting notice on the town's website. Thank you. All right. But first,
Jen, you got the pledge.
all right, this time we'll allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, the first matter on the agenda is the new application of Glenn and Margaret Jackson. The Jacksons,
Is that Osgood?
No, that's the Mr. Justin.
all right.
They're not here.
Why don't we, why don't we second call the Jackson application and move to the next matter, which is the continued application of Old Basic.
Mr. Stasek, are you able to hear the board?
We are able to hear somewhat. It's not the
Okay.
best.
Okay,
And
thank you.
We've lost the visual.
No, you should have the board. You just don't have me anymore.
Ah, okay.
We don't
Yeah.
have any.
Oh, you don't have any visual?
No.
None.
That may be on your end. I'm not sure why.
I don't think so.
Because we're seeing you fine.
Yes, you are.
But you're live. I don't know.
Are you watching it on YouTube or are you
No.
watching it on your computer?
On the iPad.
On the iPad. We've never encountered this before, so.
Yeah,
Never had issues.
we're seeing all the cameras. That's why it's very odd.
Okay.
Try,
Well,
Sure. There we go. Host can share this meeting. So we'll switch to gallery view. I can do that. Okay.
all right, we've switched to gallery view. Now we're seeing,
okay. Oh, that's why. Yeah, you were on the wrong view. Okay,
okay.
great.
All right, with respect to this application, the public hearing has been closed. Argument and evidence has been presented. So at this point, we're here to deliberate that application. So, any members of the board have questions, comments, statements that they'd like to make?
I do have a question for Attorney Osby for clarification. In the letter that you submitted to the board, I don't know if you can hear me okay through the mask?
I can barely hear you.
Just
I
have
don't
to
know
speak
where
up.
the microphone is for,
We're having the same difficulty.
Yeah, we'll try to speak up.
In the letter you
Thank you.
submitted to the board. Okay. In the letter you submitted to the board, you indicated the Steseks had owned the property since 1961 or 62. However, when I do research on the parcel viewer to understand where the property is located, I see Mr. Stasek was only added to the deed in 2005. Can you explain to me that seeming contradiction?
Because it was owned by my grandmother, which was Daria Huchra. She purchased the property in 1962 with my parents, George and Tanya Pash. Once my grandmother passed away, it passed to my mother. We were added to the deed, my sister, myself, and my husband. So that's why it's been in the family since 1962. Has that been clarified?
I'm asking the attorney who submitted the letter.
and I would reiterate my client's response that it has been in her family since 1962.
Okay. Thank you.
One suggestion I had, that since we're doing this via Zoom, and since we're all wearing masks, perhaps before you speak, you should identify yourself, so the record is clear. All right, so in deliberation of the application, you have any questions, comments? Richard? I'm sorry?
Shelley, no.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Barron?
I'd like to reemphasize the fact that it's in a parcel where it's not affecting anything. I don't see any reason, in my book, much for not anything where there's any kind of denial or anything like that. I feel they should get it. I'll come right out and say it. Okay. I feel it should be approved.
Mr. Sorry?
I have a motion that I could submit if we're ready for that. Only when we're done with discussion.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Then we have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Maybe if you're gonna read that, I hate to do this to you, but if you could come over closer, even if you're off camera, it'll be better if it's heard. Because my microphone is picking it up.
All right. Thank you. So this is just to summarize, the application proposes a 29-foot area variance for a side yard setback to build a deck. The findings, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting the area variance. The tick box is yes. Approval of the requested area variance will set a negative precedent. The applicant's pre-existing non-conforming lot is not unique to the property. The condition is shared by approximately 1,200 other properties in the community. Now, the 1,200 number, just parenthetically, that was a number that was read into the record in February or March of 2019 when we were deliberating or determining another case on City Hall Road.
Okay,
I believe it was 1247.
that's not part of the record in this case.
No. So you know where I got the number. Whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. Yes, the finding is there are alternatives available for placement of the deck that would not require a variance. Whether the requested area variance is substantial. Yes. The finding is the application proposes an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming condition. The requested variance is very substantial at 72.5%.
That's inaccurate, sir. It's not 72. Your numbers are off.
So there's an existing non-conforming condition added to the variance that you're pursuing sums up to 72.5%.
I don't think that's accurate. But go on.
Let's continue.
Okay. Whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. No, there is neither a positive nor negative impact on the physical or environmental conditions. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Board of Appeals, but not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. The finding is yes, this is a self-created difficulty. The determination based on the above factors, it is hereby determined by the Town of Rochester Zoning Board of Appeals that the request for an area variance is denied.
May I speak on behalf of my clients? The decision has been made.
No.
They have not voted yet.
Okay.
Having been seconded the motion.
Is there a second to the motion? All right, the motion has been seconded by Mr. Fisher. All right, discussion of the motion. Mary, any more to add? Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Mallory, first I'd like to thank the Stasics for having come here a number of evenings and spent a lot of time. I think pretty much everyone on the board, I think, is very sympathetic to your application. I do think that the request is substantial. And I think we have to be concerned with precedent. Meaning if we grant this application, then we have to consider any other similar applications in the future. And precedent is important. I guess that's all I have to add. I suppose, though, and one thing that seems to me is that this is now a freestanding deck. It's not connected to the house. There is a space between the house and the deck itself. I was never quite sure why the deck couldn't be placed somewhere else in the yard. Not necessarily, I mean, it may line up the way you plan it with the door, but I don't see that matters. I don't know why, other than it might look good, but if you're going to be 12, I think it's 12 feet from the yard, from the house, why can't it be somewhere else in the yard that perhaps doesn't line up with the door, but would not require variance? Sure.
You got a house with a door on, so you want to walk out onto your deck, you don't want to walk out on something and walk 10 miles to go on a patio deck or something.
But you're not walking out the door onto the deck. The deck is freestanding.
That's a freestanding deck and still walk out on, so it doesn't have to be connected.
Oh, no.
No. Well, it is, yes, I'm just saying, you can have a freestanding deck without it being connected. I know you can. I got one.
You gotta get, somehow you gotta get from the house.
Yeah, about 1 inch.
Oh, well, but that's not planning.
No. But what I want, you know,
That's why there's alternatives that exist.
as far as the precedent goes, remember, every case is different. There's a very, everything's different. There's a reason for everything. And not everybody's got the same reason.
And I agree.
Gentlemen, have you looked at the request that I sent in or what I wrote up on 7/5/20? Have you studied that?
Yes.
Does it not go to the point of the intent of this law or this code? Does it not make a good case for you to see why we're trying to do this? And it answers a lot of the questions that you just threw yeses at.
For the record, I think we're all familiar with the application. I have, and I trust we have all looked at any and all material that's been presented and have taken that material into consideration in our deliberations.
I would like to add on behalf of my clients, as far as placing a deck in a different area of the yard or the house, it would really detract from the aesthetics and it would lower their resale value of the home because it would be so misplaced. It would be very awkward and
So
it would,
financial considerations are not something that the zoning board addresses.
yes, I know, but I, at the same time, would just want to respond to that assertion that it could be anywhere. It really can't be.
Something, discussion's really the board. There's a motion on the floor.
So at this point, we are discussing among ourselves a motion that's pending before. All right, so is there any further discussion? All right, so we have a motion, it's been seconded. All in favor, and I'll call the roll.
Yeah, just do a roll call.
Mr. Saris?
Aye.
Mr. Barringer?
No.
All right, Mr. Fisher? Aye. Aye. Senator Mallory, aye. So the application is denied, and the matter is concluded. Mr. Stasek, Mrs. Stasek, thank you very much, and I think we're all sorry we couldn't accommodate you, but we are required to follow the law.
May I just say something? I think that your committee is misinterpreting its purpose. Its purpose is not to say no. Its purpose is to try and find a way that you can accommodate the property owner in their quest to do something. If it doesn't affect the community at large, if it harms no one, if it is invisible to the community even, and it does not propose any kind of a threat, this is what the intent that was written as a 40-foot setback to create open space. We have plenty of open space here. That's not being affected by this. It seems like we're off track on what it is that is your primary function. It's not to say no. It's not to read the letter of the law. It's to find, you're a variance committee. It's to find a way of making this happen for people who need this.
All right. So in response to that, Mr. Stasek, this is at least the third session that we've had on this matter. I think in previous sessions, you have all tried to find ways to accommodate what you're seeking to do. We proposed a number of alternatives and suggestions.
And excuse me, but I followed up on each one of those. I reduced the size of the deck. I made it a freestanding deck. And each time I went back, it still requires a variance. So I've done exactly what you asked me to do on each step of the way, and I'm still being denied this.
Under the law, we are required to consider your application with a view to the law, which requires that we consider a number of criteria in making our decision. And I think I previously read on a number of occasions what those criteria are. With respect to an area variance, we consider, among other things, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting of the area variance. Now, I think we've considered that, and I think we've concluded that, that the answer to that is that there is no undesirable change. Right? Okay. All right, so the applicant changes
Number 4 is
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're very close.
yeah, sometimes they're considered together.
Number 2, whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to do. I think the board has found, yes, that there are alternatives available for placement of the deck that would not require a variance. Whether the requested area variance is substantial, I think we found that, yes, it is substantial. Whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions, I'm sorry, the neighborhood, the answer there was found no. There is neither positive nor negative impact on the physical or environmental conditions. Whether the alleged difficulty is self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Board of Appeals, which shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. And finding there is that, yes, the difficulty is self-created. And as I think I mentioned earlier, there is one other factor always to be considered, and that is that in any action we take, at least in the granting of a variance, we have to
Excuse me.
consider precedent. What, if any, impact this will have on future applications? And I think the board is concerned that if we grant this application, we would have to grant other similar applications that we believe are substantial. So for these reasons, the board has.
This is an extremely unique scenario. And if somebody else came up with the exact same scenario in the woods, invisible from the public, and wanted a deck, and needed a bit of extra variance with the boundary, I don't see where that would affect anybody either. So you're making a statement here which says, oh, if somebody else wants a deck, we won't be able to say no. Yes, you will, depending on the situation. But in this situation, there's no comparison. You yourselves had pointed out to me how some of the variances that you did grant for the 2-car garage that was too close and this and that was done because you had reasons. You had reasons that it was an elderly couple. You had reasons that something else went through. We pointed those out to you as points where you granted things. And you said, well, those were special circumstances, and on you went. So you can't now tell me that this is going to be a precedent for everybody who wants a deck. It's not going to be a precedent because it's so unique.
Mr. Stacy.
You can easily write the variance that it is stipulating that the deck is not seen, that the deck is in the woods, that it's not seen from the street. There's so many ways you can stipulate that in the variance that nobody's going to be looking to do that.
And each piece of property is distinct in the eyes of the law. They are not interchangeable. There is nothing identical. Every piece of property has its own set of circumstances, as my client has asserted.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Spacek. The board has ruled. I suggest you now consult with your client.
Yes. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The next matter on the agenda is the continued application of Allison and Sean Booth. All right. Again, the public hearing has been concluded. All evidence and argument has been presented. We're here to make our determination. Deliberate and get any closer. Do we have anyone who wishes to start the discussion? If you had some, you might want to consider combining this with the continued application of the Catalpa Lane neighbors because of the similarity of issues. Is there a motion to consider these two jointly?
I make a motion to address both applications and both the application for the variance and the appeal of the code enforcement decision, since they're related and intertwined, as one, keep them as one decision.
Is there a second of that motion? I'll second. Mr. Barringer seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so Mr. Sars, do the roll call, sorry. You vote aye?
I did.
Mr. Barringer? Aye. Aye. Mr. Fisher? Yes. And Mr. Mallory votes aye. All right, so we're going to hear these two, we're going to consider these two matters together. I know that they are both class 2 seeker type 2 matters. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Fisher, no. Barringer, no. Sars?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I would note that before we entertain a motion, that there was a determination made by the code enforcement officer, Mr. Davis, some time ago with respect to this application, that at that time, not all of the facts and circumstances presented to Mr. Davis were known, or certainly not as well known as they are to us, having heard over the last few months seen a number of documents presented, a great deal of testimony, and legal arguments both for and against. These things were not available to Mr. Davis, the code enforcement officer, at the time he made his determination some months ago. Okay. We have a motion.
I have a motion. You mind coming over again, Bruce? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cyrus has a motion.
Thank you. So based on the applicant's testimony, the extensive documentation that was submitted, as well as the public hearings, the zoning board finds the following. The applicants built a guest house with private recording studio on their property located at 122 Catalpa Lane in the town of Rochester. The applicant's residence is also located on the 122 Catalpa Lane property in a separate building. Mr. Hoots is a musician and currently uses the music studio for his private projects. The applicants now wish to utilize the private recording studio as a private commercial music studio as a Class 2 home occupation. The applicants have represented that musicians would come to the property to record music for a fee, and that the applicant, Sean Hoots, would be involved in the music projects as producer and/or composer. There could be more than one musician who comes to record at the studio at one time, in addition to Mr. Hoots. The applicant provided a noise study that showed the studio did have some soundproofing. The study demonstrated that this is in certain extreme circumstances, it would be possible to hear noise at the property lines. The town of Rochester zoning code allows for type 2 home occupations that do not exceed 500 square feet in area. The proposed studio is 784 square feet in size. The town of Rochester zoning code allows for type 3 home occupations that do not exceed 750 square feet in area, but commercial recording studios are allowed as a Class 3 occupation in the R2 district where the property is located. I'm sorry, I read this incorrectly. Let me reread it. The town of Rochester zoning code allows for type 3 home occupations that do not exceed 700 square feet in area, but commercial recording studios are not allowed as Class 3 occupation in the R2 district where this property is located. The determination on the appeal. Pursuant to the town of Rochester Code 144-66 and reviewing the decision of the code enforcement officer, the zoning board of appeals may reverse or affirm wholly or partly, or may modify the order, requirement, decision, interpretation, or determination as, in its opinion, ought to have been made in the matter by the administration official charged with the enforcement of this chapter, and that to that end shall have all powers of the administrative official from whose order, requirement, decision, interpretation, or determination the appeal is taken. Zoning Code Section 140-19A describes a Class 2 home occupation as a low-impact home-based business or commercial activity administered or conducted as an accessory use that is clearly secondary to the use as a residential dwelling and does not significantly change the character thereof, involve the use as a residential dwelling, and does not significantly change the character thereof, involve the use of mechanical equipment other than is customarily used for domestic purposes, and involves no retail or services resulting in other than an occasional and limited number of visitors. In addition to the 500 square foot limitation from which the applicants seek a variance, the listed requirements include no more than one on-site employee other than the family members residing in the dwelling. This level of home occupation clearly calls for a very limited visitation to the property. This board determines that the CEO incorrectly issued the determination that this is a type 2 home occupation requiring an area variance. In reviewing this application, evidence obtained during these proceedings show that the use of the property will result in multiple people coming to the property to use the proposed recording studio, and there is no limitation to when or how the applicants and the neighboring property owners, to how or when these visitors or clients will utilize the studio. The evidence presented to this board by both the applicants and neighboring property owners lead to this board's determination that this proposed use does not fall into the description of a Class 2 occupation, but rather falls into the description of a Class 3 home occupation, which does not have the restrictions of occasional or limited number of visitors, allows for 2 employees who reside outside of the home, and allows a larger floor area. The code does not, however, allow for a Class 3 home occupation in the R2 zoning district where this property is located. Therefore, the applicant should have been classified as a type 3 home occupation, and the application to the Code Enforcement Office should have been denied with the proviso that the applicant would need to obtain both a use variance and an area variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals in order to operate the commercial recording studio at the 122 Catawba Lane location. To the variance application. While the overturning of the CEO's decision could make the application for an area variance unnecessary, this board chooses to address the same. The Town of Rochester Zoning Code 140-66C provides as the following with respect to reviewing area variances. In making its determination, the Zoning Board of Appeals shall take into consideration the benefit to the applicant if the variance is granted as weighted against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. In making such a determination, the Board of Appeals shall also consider whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting the area variance, whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance, whether the requested area variance is substantial, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse impact or effect on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood and district, and lastly, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the variance. In reviewing the application for an area variance, the Zoning Board of Appeals finds the level of activity that is anticipated related to the proposed home occupation in this variant, if this variance is granted, will produce an undesirable change in the neighborhood by potential increases to traffic on small private residential roadway and potential for some noise escaping from the studio. With regard to question 2, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by another method. With respect to if the area variance is substantial, the requested area variance is quite substantial at an increase of 56.8% above the allowed square footage. Whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical environmental conditions in the neighborhood. The requested variance may have a small impact on the environmental conditions of the neighborhood in traffic increase and potential noise effects. Whether the hardship was self-created. The hardship was self-created as admitted by the applicants during the review process. Weighing the above factors, the requested variance is denied due to the substantial nature of the request, the potential effect on the character and environment of the neighborhood, and the fact that the hardship was self-created. Therefore, the determination of the Code Enforcement Officer is overturned and the application is deemed to be a type 3 home occupation. In order to use the property as a private commercial recording studio, the applicant must obtain both a use and area variance. The application for area variance is denied for the reasons outlined.
You have a second to the motion. All right, the motion has been seconded by Mr. Fisher. Discussion. Fisher, do you have anything to add? No. Maren, do you start? No. All right. Are you ready to vote? I will ask who is in favor of the motion by roll call. Mr. Fisher? Yes. All right. vote to grant the motion. All right, Ms. Barringer?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Sires?
Yes.
All right, and Ms. Mallory, I vote yes also. So with respect to the Fuchsia application, that request for an area variance is denied. With respect to the Catalpa Lane application, which seeks to overturn the code enforcement officer's decision, that motion is granted to the extent that we find that a type 3 home office is required and that such would require a use variance, as well as an area variance, since I think even with type 3 home occupation, it's 750 feet, so this would exceed even type 3. So that is our motion, that is our order. Thank you. All right, so the last matter for the board is the first one, the application of Glenn and Margaret Jackson.
Yeah, I'll have to find if any of these people are here for the application. The person who is on the iPhone, are you here for an application? What was the name? Jackson? Are you here for the Jackson application?
If that's me, no.
Okay, the person on, it's labeled iPhone, so I don't have any answer as to who it is.
Emily Fenton.
Okay, thank you. The person that's on the phone number 399-5180, are you here for the Jackson application? (399-5180) phone number?
No, I'm just listening in on the.
Okay,
Catalpa Lane
thank you. Thank you.
determination.
Sorry, we're just trying to identify if an applicant is here. Thank you very much. Let me check this one more. The person at the 646-675-7030, are you for the Jackson application?
No, we were here for the Catalpa Lane.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's they are not here.
All right, there appears to be no one present on behalf of the Jackson. So table that. Mr. Second, all in favor? Aye. Mr. Badger? In favor? And Kevin Mallory also in favor. Okay, so we'll table the Jackson matter pending. All right, any other matters on the agenda minutes? Anybody want to make a motion to accept the minutes? Anybody
No.
table that for next month?
Motion to table minutes.
Unless ours, motion to table minutes, seconded. Mr. Seconds, all in favor? Aye. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
No. Other matters.
Is there, okay, are there other matters?
I've heard a couple other times, last time you tabled it real quick. Getting the paperwork in reasonable time that we got, within maybe 10 seconds to look at it beforehand, set a time span or do something with it.
I agree that that's a problem. I think it's more of a problem for the person submitting it because they get less consideration, less attention that we have to give to them. But I don't want to cut off something just because it got in the last minute.
It would have been cut off if you put off till the following month.
Well, if you haven't read it, you haven't read it, and you don't have to decide until you have read it. So, I mean, that's fine. But I don't want to not take something just because, sometimes it happens at the last minute, something comes up. So, but if you haven't read it, you haven't had a chance to read it, then we definitely will put it off to the next.
But I think what Bill is saying is that we should be clear on what the expectations that they have in 2 weeks in advance. And that what we're finding is that, rather than being the exception that it's submitted a day or two before, it's almost as if they know people and behave as if they have up until the meeting to submit it. So I think we have to be firmer in setting that expectation that it's 2 weeks ahead of time, whatever that time frame is.
A week ahead of time.
Yeah.
What we could do is add a notice that every time someone comes in and applies for variance, we can hand them a notice that says, here are our requirements for submissions. Bill, you wanna work up a schedule of, the times, that you want, a week, whatever it is, or any submissions?
Everything in within a week. Well, have everything that you want heard or some, on paper to a meeting.
So the August
That's coming
20th
up.
meeting, you wanted it by August 13th.
Well, just as a general rule. that,
Well,
that it be-
a week before the meeting,
1 week before.
Right, is it 5 business days, 7 calendar days?
1 week.
Right, 1 week, 7 calendar days before the matter is to be heard. You all in agreement on that?
Yeah.
Okay,
That gives us some time to go over it. Yeah.
that
Why don't
sounds
we
good, I'm fine
provide
with
the
that.
motion so it's official?
Okay. So we have I'll make a motion that we prepare a notice to go out with every application to the effect that any and all submissions that they expect the board to consider in an application should be before the board, should be presented to the, okay, so I'll make a motion.
Must
Has
be.
to be. Not should be.
I think that sometimes there are circumstances that things come in.
All reasonable
Has to
efforts.
be submitted,
Right.
otherwise will be considered the following month.
Well, for instance, if we get it on like 6 days prior to the meeting, and you've read it, and I've read it, and everybody's read it, what are we gonna do? We're not gonna put off the matter for a week, right? So I think Bruce is suggesting that all reasonable efforts should be made, but I'm
Yeah.
uncomfortable with saying, like we ain't gonna consider it for next month.
Should or will be.
You can say we will be.
Sure.
Well, something like to the effect, in order to ensure that it's considered for the meeting, it should be in by the week ahead of time.
That's right.
That's
You have one option of.
Right,
Yep.
otherwise it may not.
But the goal is to get the stuff in front of us, so we have enough time to consider it. And I agree with that 100%. I'm just saying, sometimes
I know what you're saying.
things happen.
Certain things happen.
Right. But we would prefer, and strongly prefer that, we not get things discussed. Exactly.
So you could do, as Bruce says, in order to assure that your submission will be considered at the regular planning board meeting. It should be. I'm sorry.
Should be
Where am I?
submitted to
I'm in the room.
1 week ahead of
Before the
time.
meeting.
A week prior to the meeting date.
Right, and then that gives you that option to say, if you get the meeting.
I'm good? Yes. All right. So we have a motion, we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cyrus, seconds. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Berenger, yes. Mr. Cyrus, yes. I say yes. So, Brianna, could you prepare a notice to go out with every application? Thank you.
Make a motion to send you draft findings.
Motion to adjourn?
Would you like me to send you draft findings?
Mr. Fisher, seconds. So we have a motion that's been seconded to adjourn. Mr. Cyrus?
Aye.
Mr. Berenger?
Aye.
Fisher? Aye. All in favor, motion carries. Great. Thank you very much.